I'm currently in beautiful downtown San Francisco. You'll see the Bay Bridge coming up here on the left in a second. Once this light turns green, I won't be looking at you anymore. Whoa, there's a big motorcycle there. But I want to talk about failure in different parts of the world. And I'm going to be careful how I articulate this because 50% of all founders and engineers here in the Bay Area were born overseas. And here in the San Francisco Bay Area, you know, failure is actually cool. It's okay if you failed. Just keep trying. Nobody's ever amounted to anything in life without having failed many times first. Now, I'm going to talk about the East Coast, certain regions on the East Coast. I got to be careful. I don't want to piss anybody off, but I'm gonna call a spade a spade. I find that on the East Coast, and I'm from the East Coast originally, that failure is a bit more shameful there. But if you're successful later on, then everyone forgets about the failure. Now, there's other countries in certain parts of the world where if you fail and if you're successful later in life, a lot of times people will still just kind of think about and remember that failure. And there's different regions, and so when it comes to raising money for your startup, I'm not going to name certain regions in the world, whatever, but if you're trying to raise money and you're in a culture where failure is ridiculously shameful, then it might not be the right location to raise money from. You know, maybe you want to focus on other parts of the world where failure is less shameful and people are willing to take risks, right? And I know this is kind of a controversial thing to even talk about, but I had to really put it out there. And let me talk about why people are willing to take risks here in the Bay Area. And again, this is not an America West Coast thing, because you know, half of the wonderful founders in this part of the world on the West Coast here in the San Francisco Bay Area were born overseas. You know, yet Sergey from Google was born in Russia. Elon Musk, he's here. He was born in South Africa. Pierre Omidyar, he was born in Iran. It's just a cultural thing here. It's interesting. And the San Francisco Bay Area has been about risk taking for years. If you think about it, you had the San Francisco gold rush here in the, I think, the 1840s or so, 1800s. And a lot of people moved here to, you know, because they wanted to, you know, find gold, whatever, a lot of risk takers. So it's kind of embedded in the DNA subfabric of the Bay Area. And also another thing happened, which not many people talk about, which is in the 1960s, there was a big cultural pushback here in the Bay Area. And nobody talks about this. But what happened was the Kennedy administration, John F. Kennedy, created NASA. And NASA's goal was to put the first person on the moon before the Soviets, because the Soviets beat America to space, and Americans were brokenhearted. So in order to do so, what happened was NASA had to find a way to put 100,000 transistors in the top part of a rocket ship. Top part's called the fuselage. And so one of the first venture capital investments was done then in a company called Fairchild Semiconductor. And Fairchild Semiconductor pulled it off. And as a result, NASA got the first person on the moon in 1969. And what happened around that time was the semiconductor industry grew here a lot. And so did the hardware industry, software, internet eventually, whatever. But what happened was in the late 60s, there were these riots that started here in the Bay Area, starting at Berkeley, because of the Vietnam War. A lot of people didn't agree with the Vietnam War at the time. And so what happened was the riots from Berkeley, which is right across the water here, kind of spread all the way down about an hour south of where I am right now to Palo Alto, to Stanford University. And in the late 60s, nobody talks about this, it's fascinating, but 400 students took over the Stanford University administration buildings, because 50% of Stanford's R&D at the time was highly classified government military weapons research. And of course they pushed back. And so what happened was Stanford administration did something really cool. They said, we're sorry. And they pushed all of that weapons research off campus. into SRU or Stanford. It was called SRI, Stanford Research Institute. I had to re-edit that. Sorry, I forgot the name. The older you get, the better. The older I get, the better I was. I forget things. And then, so what happened was, Stanford pushed the Stanford Research Institute, or SRI, off campus and started to share ideas. And open source software was born where people started sharing stuff. It was awesome. And right by Stanford University, Sand Hill Road emerged. And Sand Hill is kind of like Wall Street. So Wall Street's in New York City, of course, and that's where a lot of the investment banks are for companies going public. Now, when companies are private and they want to raise money, they raise from venture capital firms. And so our Wall Street out here, so to speak, is Sand Hill Road. And so what happened was there is this notion of pushing back on authority here, and, war is bad, of course, and the peace movement started out here. And so a lot of people try to create, and I get government officials, they'll call me every now and then and say, we're interested in exploring the opportunity of creating our own Silicon Valley overseas. And what they don't understand is that it takes decades to do it, because there's got to be a cultural shift in the mentality, right? And so Silicon Valley is like 50 years in the making. Anyway, it's one of the reasons why, failure here is kind of cool. It's not shameful. People share information here, and it's just a different mentality, and I love being part of it. And again, it's not an American thing, because 50% of all founders here were born overseas. So anyway, that's a little bit of discussion about failure. I don't know if today this was helpful, but if it was, click the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you mañana. And by the way, this is where the San Francisco Giants play here. You'll see a beautiful statue of Willie Mays here as well. I'm winging this, I know, but I want to tell you something really cool, actually. I just found out. So at a lot of sporting events, you're not allowed to have drones, right? And I know this because I have a drone and I can't fly it anywhere out here, right? Except for, over my house and a couple of parks. And so for security reasons, the San Francisco Giants, they have their own drone. And what happens is this: it's like a Predator drone. It shoots out a spider web around other drones and carries them out to the water. They haven't had to use it yet, but unfortunately, it's whatever. There's going to be somebody that eventually uses the drone to do something, whatever, wrong. But they have kind of precautions for that over here, which is pretty cool. I'm getting honked at. I'm not gonna move around. I got a bike rider in front of me here. Anyway. That's not too nice. All right, anyway, I'm gonna wrap it up. If this was helpful, click the like button and subscribe, and I will see you, I'll see you mañana. Thank you.